Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be talking about regulation battles, because we have a new one on the horizon. This time it's going to be Volume 3, and just like Volumes 1 and 2 before it, this is going to be offering a new rule set for you to familiarize yourself, so that way you could build a legal deck for this event, and be able to play and participate in it. But before we get into the main topic, if you enjoy this type of content and find it to be helpful and informative, you already know what to do with the social media doobly-doos. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date when I upload or go live next. So, if you're unfamiliar with what regulation battles are, basically they are just essentially side events that have a alternating rule set each time they do a regulation battle. So this means that every single time it's going to be a different rule set. Whether Bandai's actually going to take this rule set and implement it into the game outside of these one-shot events is something to be determined. This seems like it's going to be a testing ground to see what is really sticking and resonating with players, what they've been enjoying, and what kind of new and creative rule sets that Bandai is willing to test and try out, which I think is pretty cool, because sometimes the main game of Digimon can get a little bit boring and stale, because that's currently the only actual way to play Digimon. So these are here to shake that up a little bit and offer a little bit of variety into the game, which is really decent. Even though the pricing is kind of lackluster, that's not the point. These are supposed to be more casual styled events that anyone could really think about picking up and playing in. And as far as what Volume 3 is doing, Volume 3 is going to be a block icon battle. So, aka, if Bandai decided to do rotation starting with Block 4, this is the format that we would find ourselves playing in. So, I don't know if this is Bandai testing rotation or testing block battles or whatever, but it's just something interesting to think about, especially since Bandai's limiting the blocks that are legal to the two most recent, which is Blocks 4 and Blocks 5. So as far as where to look to see if a card is going to be legal for this event, well, you could see them in the bottom right-hand corner of the cards, right next to the name. Underneath the set number and rarity is where you're going to find the block icon. And obviously, this being blocks 4 and 5 focused means that you're going to only be able to utilize cards that were from blocks 4 and blocks 5, or reprinted in blocks 4 and blocks 5 with the block icon changed. Alright, so now that we know what the rules are going to be and what cards are sort of legal, I'll get into like some more of that in a little bit. Let's try to understand what we're actually playing for. So the pricing this time around is going to be the BT21 Gurimon as the participation prize. The frame is in a more fall theme versus the other two, which was more in spring and summer theme. Looks like there's going to be a seasonal trend where the next regulation battle should be winter themed, and then rinse and repeat until Bandai decides not to do these anymore. But regardless of the bordering, the winner card is going to be of BT7 Skull Knightmon. And then depending on the store, they may or may not do additional pricing. It really just depends on what the store feels like and how they're going to be running and managing their events. So, when does this event actually take place? We have a little bit of time to prepare for this event, knowing what the rule set is, and it looks like this event is going to take place starting October 1st and run all the way through the end of November. So, about 2 whole months to be able to play in this event, and we do have to keep in mind that in the middle of this event, we're actually going to have a couple of set releases, one being Billion Bullets, which is going to introduce a couple of new generic staple option cards, as well as some reprints of promos and whatnot. And then the other big one is going to be the mainline set of BT23. So that's going to change the format mid-event run, which is really interesting and I guess kind of keeps it fresh in a really weird and awkward way. But as far as what the event is going to hold, we're going to have to be aware that these events are not very well thought through or tested at times, and there's going to just be some native imbalances. So the core rules are really inflexible when it comes to how Digimon plays, which is why these events generally aren't necessarily super popular. And on top of that, how sets and cards are designed also don't necessarily play well with these alternating rule sets, and because of these two big factors, there's just going to be some inherent imbalances when it comes to this format, especially with block style format. It's definitely going to be favoring certain decks wanting to be played just because they don't necessarily need or wanted cards from any other block outside of their own, or if they do, then the cards might have gotten reprinted in their favor. So yeah, it's just going to be a really weird event, but that's just all regulation battles at this point. So let's talk about reprints, because certain cards, when Bandai does reprint a card, they will sometimes change the block icon, and the cards that are going to be legal for this event are changed because some of these older cards might have gotten reprinted with the block icon change. So because these cards are changed to be in the current block format, they are technically legal. So as far as the really big and most important reprints to acknowledge, we do have to note that all of the training cards, all 6 of them, are going to be legal for this event because they did get reprinted in a starter deck in Block 4, so that changed their block icon to be that of Block 4, which makes them legal. And then when it comes to memory boosts, we only have 2 memory boosts that are actually legal. And again, this comes from the fact that they were reprinted in starter decks, and there were only 2 starter decks versus 6 starter decks, so not all of the memory boosts actually made it in to be able to get the block icon reprint change to be legal for this event. So that's just another fun fact in terms of what is going to be legal to play when it comes to some of the older cards. And again, this could favor what specific decks are going to do well or could do well because of these reprints. But when it comes to memory boosts as a whole, yes, even though the monocolor older ones aren't going to all be legal, there's still going to be memory boosts in the format with the 2-color gem boosts, and the Billion Bullet set is going to be coming and introducing more of those. So again, it's not like it's really changing that much dramatically, it's just something to keep track of and note. And as far as other cards that got reprinted, the staples aren't necessarily alone. We do have a small list that I could find based on some light level research, because blocks aren't necessarily super well documented when it comes to what got reprinted and what block icon changed and whatnot. So it kind of made doing the research for what actually is or did get reprinted and legal for this event a little bit harder, since literally nobody actually has been tracking what block a card has been from. And that's kind of weird, because you would think that generally a lot of databases would keep track of that, and the one that didn't necessarily do the best job, and every other database literally didn't even keep track of it, not even Bandai's. But regardless, there are a couple of cards that did get a block icon shift to be legal for this event, and that's going to be BT12 Agumon, BT15 Lugamon, BT16 Vmon, BT16 Pulsemon, BT17 Guilmon, BT17 Agunimon, BT17 Lobomon, BT17 Renamon, BT17 Terriermon, EX6 Zubamon, and EX6 Ludomon. Even though I think that the majority of these reprints don't necessarily matter as much as the staple ones, they could come into play depending on what you're looking to build and play with. And the big thing that you just want to keep in track, if you just want to make your life easier, is the fact that Block 4 started all the way back in EX7. So going from EX7 forward, any card that was found in a main set should be legal for this event. So let's actually talk about some decks. Now that we know what's going to be legal and we do have some metadata that we can infer from, we could kind of take a guess what's actually going to be a halfway decent deck for this event. So I just listed all of the decks in a general sense that are going to be legal, and that's going to be the list that you see here, which is going to contain adventures, any DM deck, more specifically DM Machinedramon is going to be the big standout. Crosshearts could be legal, any Liberators deck is legal, any hybrid deck utilizing the BT 18 cards is going to be legal. Any family deck is going to be legal, so that's like Wingardians and Deep Savers. We have Chronicles going to be legal, Excel, Heroes, apps, any apps more specifically. Any CS related deck is technically going to be legal. Abetamon, Gallantmon, Millenniumon, Seedramon X, Dark Knight, and Lord Knight could be legal, and then anything that's going to be coming out with EX10 and BT23 that we don't have data on. I'm sure there's more decks that are going to be legal for this type of event. This is already a decent selection of decks, but this is pretty much the majority of what you're most likely going to end up seeing. And some decks might need a little bit more reworks than others, depending on what you're playing and what the deck is actually losing and what you could possibly replace with it. So, as far as the key to success, not only do you just have to pick, obviously, a legal deck, you have to know and understand how that deck is going to be played, and understanding the matchups between that deck and some of the other top known decks are definitely going to be for your overall benefit. But when it comes to what's actually going to be doing well, I probably would favor the decks that are heavily in blocks 4 and 5, and any deck that you have to start replacing a lot of cards with just to make legal, even if it does have the legal cards, but the legal cards weren't necessarily good enough to see play in the competitive version, might not mean that that card or deck is actually going to be good. So that's kind of why a deck like, let's just say, Adventures is going to do relatively well, because it literally doesn't need any outside resources outside of what's inside of the block, which it's not even using to its full extent, and it's just a very self-contained deck, which makes it really safe and easy to want to play. And that's not the only deck that I probably would recommend. The big three that I probably would say are the strongest decks of the format based on the data that we have available to us is looking to be Machinedramon, Adventures, and probably Liberator Puppets, if I had to take a guess at the third best deck. I just know that Adventures and Machinedramon are two very popular and powerful decks, and, well, Liberator Puppets, with the slight shift in change of the format, the meta might not have the tools to be able to handle what Puppets can currently do. But I don't necessarily think the speed of the format is going to be any slower because, again, the speed bar of Digimon is already pretty high, and a lot of the newer tools are designed to try to keep up with some of the older tools that were currently power spiking the overall tempo of the game. So, with all that said and done, what do you think of this current event? I know we have plenty of time to be able to prepare. Tell me your thoughts about the event down in the comments below, and also don't forget to tell me what deck you're thinking about playing down in the comments below as well. I think that it's good to have alternative formats for Digimon, even if they are flash in the pans, just because the main game could be a little bit grating after extensive amounts of play, so having a little break and refresher with something different is always a good thing in my perspective. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Later!